Right, today we're going to talk about one of the more controversial subjects in the hobby. And in my opinion, it really is a dark side of keeping fish. Now, it is prolific in the African cichlid side of things. And I think it's a really important topic because whether you're new to African cichlids or whether you're a very experienced keeper, it's a problem that you're going to come across, and you're going to be a victim of this at some point if you're keeping especially peacock cichlids. So today we're going to talk all about juiced fish. Right, as you can see, this fish room's a little bit of a mess because of the paludarium build that's going on at the moment, and this tank is overdue a water change. So we're going to talk about this topic while I do a little bit of maintenance on this tank. So, I mean, we'll start off with juiced fish. Juiced is a slang term what people use to describe a fish that has been artificially enhanced with hormones. Now, when you go into fish shops and you see these brightly coloured fish, and it's primarily peacock cichlids what this happens with, you don't tend to get juiced and booners because there's not really any need to juice them. A lot of them have bright colour at a juvenile stage. And then you don't really see it with haplochromases either. So what people do is they use hormones to dose these fish at an early age in batches. And what that does is it enhances the colour of the fish. So what happens to people like you and me is we'll go into the fish shops and we'll see these beautiful, brightly coloured neon fish. And to an inexperienced eye, you can think you've won the lottery when the reality of it is that fish has actually been treated with hormones. And what typically happens is you can bring that fish back to your tank. Like I said, this is usually peacock cichlids because they have the most vibrant colours, and people always buy the males that are the most, fluorescent. They look nuclear sometimes when they're dosed with hormones. So people like you and me will go into the shop, we'll buy these brightly coloured cichlids thinking we've hit the jackpot, and then when you get them back into your tank, what happens is over a couple of weeks all that colour fades away because they're not receiving that dose of hormones like they initially were back from wherever they came from. So you end up with a really dull coloured down fish. And in some cases with me, it's happened in this display tank with the blackfish that I've got here. It can end up being a female. So you can have a peacock that's stunning, beautiful, full breeding dress, and then a few weeks down the line, like this one here, is holding eggs and producing fry. So it's a really important topic to discuss. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is how to spot some warning signs, where usually this hormone dosing process takes place. Now, what you don't want to do is you don't want to be going and pointing the finger at your local fish store if you are a victim of this. So hormones are usually introduced to African cichlids at the fry stage on large-scale breeding operations, usually in places like Southeast Asia. So what essentially is happening is these big breeding setups will dose the fish with the hormone prior to your local fish shop getting a batch of these fish in. So a lot of these shops are oblivious to this process, So essentially all that's happening is these breeders are dosing the fish at that stage because the demand for male fish is high and the coloration sells. So essentially what's happening is they're getting the juveniles to hit their breeding colours at an early stage, in which in turn makes it easier for those fish to sell and creates a higher demand for them. It also will turn the female characteristics male. So any female fry that are in their batches will start developing colour and male characteristics. So it's a bit of a backhanded practice, and it's not very good for the fish either. So this can make the fish sterile in the long term. And I've had juiced fish before, which I've gone into my tank, coloured down, and then they never recover from it. So they never find that peak coloration ever again. So, you know, there's a lot of theories about what it does to the fish, but I think it does some long-term damage to them. Essentially, you are giving the fish steroids, so you're disrupting their endocrine system, you're making it unnatural, and then it can probably do some damage to a point where that fish's endocrine system can never catch up again and never produce what it was producing, especially if you're hitting them with all these high doses at a stage where they're juvenile and they've not fully developed. Another important thing to bear in mind as well before you start, you know, accusing fish stores of selling juiced fish is sometimes fish can just colour down in the tank naturally. So I've had it with loads of fish where, you know, you'll go into a fish shop, this fish will be in the display tank in the fish store, brightly coloured, dominant fish. You bring it back to your system, you put it in your setup, and then that fish loses all its colour. And I think the uncertainty with this topic, the fact that there is juiced fish out there, you know, can create a panic in some people, whereas they think as soon as that fish colours down, that they've got a juiced fish. But that isn't always the case, because coloration in peacock cichlids is primarily based on dominance. So you can take a fish from the fish store that looks bursting with colour and beautiful, dominant fish, put it in your tank. It's not in an environment where it's established its place, and that can naturally make the fish colour down. So it's something to bear in mind before you start pointing the finger. Usually if you get several fish and then they all colour down, then yeah, that's a little bit of a warning sign if they all do it. But you know, if you've just got the odd one fish that colours down when you put it in your tank and the others that you've bought are fine, that can be a hierarchy issue. So that could be how the fish is feeling. The fish has to feel somewhat dominant for it to colour up. So if you take it from an established tank where it is the dominant fish and put it into a big display like this one, where there's loads of dominant fish already in here, sometimes it can colour down on its own. So it's not always going to be a juiced fish. But let's talk about some of the warning signs and what to look out for when you are purchasing in the store that can give you a little bit of guidance as to whether that fish might be juiced or not. Now, there isn't a particular smoking gun that's going to tell you if a fish is juiced or not. So getting these juiced fish, it happens to the best of us. I mean, I like to consider myself as a very experienced keeper of African cichlids, and even I've been a victim of it and fell for it, even recently. So, but there's a few things that I try and do to mitigate the chances of picking up a juiced cichlid. So the first one is try not to buy peacock cichlids online. So what you don't want to do is blind purchase peacock cichlids. These are the ones that are most frequently dosed because of their breeding dress. So you don't want to blind purchase them, because then you run, when you purchase online, you're not seeing the fish, you're not seeing the tank, and you're not seeing the tank mates. So it makes it very hard, it makes it impossible to distinguish whether you're going to get a juiced fish or not. You're essentially taking a gamble. The second thing to look out for is juveniles that are showing a lot of colour. So peacock cichlids, really, if you're raising them naturally, they shouldn't really be showing any sort of breeding dress until they're bigger than 2 inches in size. So if you've got, if you come across a tank with juvenile tiny peacock cichlids in there, and they're showing breeding dress like this adult one I've got here, the ruby red, that's a warning sign. A fish that big should not be showing that amount of colour at that size. So there's a very high possibility that that is a juiced batch of fish. So just be wary of that. If you're buying juveniles and they're showing nuclear colours, it's probably a good sign that that fish has been treated with hormones. Another one to look out for, this is one that I typically do, is when every single fish in the tank is exploding like a firework. So if you're going to a tank and every single fish in there is just nuclear, that can be a sign that those fish have been juiced. So, I mean, I've done that. I mean, the thing is is when you go to the shop and you see all this colour in front of you, sometimes you do take the risk because you think, you don't want to turn away and leave that fish in the shop because there's such a good looking fish. But chances are, if every single fish looks like a dominant fish inside the tank, there's a good chance that they're juiced. Behaviour. If the fish is acting overly aggressive and again showing bright coloration, that is another sign that you've got a juiced fish. So those are typically the things that I follow to try and identify what I'm buying. Another one is to, if you've got a local breeder, a lot of local breeders in this country, they don't tend to dose the fish. They'll breed them responsibly. So if you can get a decent breeder and someone that's reputable, then that's a good place to source your peacock cichlids from. The key to it is to be patient. So, don't try and do everything at once. Don't try and buy the ready-made thing. It's a lot of fun getting these cichlids at 2-3 inches, these peacocks. And what you should be doing is looking for signs of how they're going to progress. So, for example, this ruby red, when I bought this ruby red, he wasn't fully coloured up. He wasn't in full breeding dress. But you've got to look at the potential. When he was about 2-3 inches, he had very slight flashes of blue in the face. He had a little bit of spunk about him, but all he had was a little red shoulder. But the red shoulder that he had was very deep in coloration. And that, to me, sort of, that gave me the signals that fish had a little bit of potential to colour up. So try and aim for fish with potential. Get them 2-3 inches. Or if you're going to get fry, don't get fried at a rate that are showing loads of coloration. It's a warning sign. I always usually go on display tanks, fish 2, 3, 4 inches with a little bit of promise, a little bit of potential in them. Another one is this yellow OB. When I bought this yellow OB, he had those signature blue marks in the gills, and he had like a lemony tint to him, as though he was only just coming into breeding dress. So I saw the potential in that fish, bought him, and over time he's developed into this stunning yellow OB male. So it's all about patience. Look for the potential in the fish and buy them on potential, not on the finished product. Right, so that's it. You've had a little bit of a lesson on juiced fish. Got a few pointers and tips there on how to try and identify them. Like I've said, it's going to be something that you come across. Even, the most experienced keepers will have had juiced fish at some point. But it's a bit of a darker side of the hobby. and it's probably something that's never going to go away, because these hormone treatments and stuff in fish in countries like, you know, places like Southeast Asia, where it's prolific, you know, it's not regulated. So it's not something that, you know, is heavily enforced. They're allowed to do it, and what they're doing works. It sells, especially to inexperienced keepers. You know, they'll pull them fish straight off the shelf. So, important topic, you know, a big one and a big problem in the African cichlid world. But at least you've got a little bit of information now that hopefully will help you pick the right fish.